Today on the Hobby Grotto, we're looking at 3 different ways to paint human skin on minis. The first is fair Caucasian skin, and I start with a base coat of Cadian flesh tone, nice and watered down, and I keep all skin paints fairly watered down because they have a tendency to be, thicker paints, and you have to do a lot of layers with skin, so you don't want any thick bumpy areas. After that's dry, I hit it with some Nuln oil because I like a black lining effect on my minis, but you could also use a brown wash here. After that, I'm coming back with the Cadian flesh tone and doing the first layer, and this is going to be covering most of the surfaces, but we've still got that darkened area from the wash and all the cracks and crevices. Now we start highlighting with a 50-50 Cadian flesh tone and Kislev flesh mix, and with each of these subsequent layers we're going to be doing smaller highlights, but you can still be quite generous with your distribution on the first layers. And if you're only painting a small area of skin like a face, you can just go straight to Kislev flesh. You don't have to, blend it as much as I'm doing. The next highlight here is with pure Kislev flesh. Again, nice and thin, so you're almost glazing these highlights on in parts. That's the trick to painting skin, nice thin layers. You can always put more on, but a little bit more difficult to take it off. The final highlights are a mix of Kislev flesh and white scar, and these are kept minimal because they can be quite stark. This is really an optional stage. You don't have to highlight this much for a tabletop standard, but it can be quite nice on feature models. Next up is tan skin, and the base coat is XV88, which is such a useful colour across the board, but really good for tan skin because it's a light brown, but it's also got a bit of a yellow tone to it, which works nicely with our Kislev flesh highlights. Once the base coat's dry, and I like to do 2 layers of this even though it's a colour with good coverage, I'm applying a Nuln oil wash, and like I said with the previous skin, you could use a brown wash here instead, or another kind of wash of your choosing. I just prefer the look of the Nuln oil. After that, we're reapplying the XV88, being careful not to cover up any of that nice shading. Nice thin coats as always with the skin. Now I'm going to be mixing all the highlights here with Kislev flesh because it's a skin tone that also has a bit of yellow to it. And I'm starting with just a bit of Kislev in there. The beauty of this colour scheme is that you can vary how light or dark you want this tan skin to be by mixing up more successive highlights with the Kislev flesh. Because we're using a flesh tone for the highlights rather than something like white, you can keep going up to pure Kislev flesh highlights depending on the overall look you want for the skin. You can lighten it as much as you want. Now for the dark skin, we're starting with a base of Rhinox hide, and this is a solid dark colour, so 1 coat's usually enough. Followed by some Nuln oil to generate our shading. Once that's dry, I'm repainting the Rhinox hide to bring back some of the colour loss from the wash. It's just going to create a better base for our highlights that way. In the same way as the other skin, we're going to be blending up through a couple of layers. First with Rhinox Hide and Doombull Brown, which is a great colour to pair with Rhinox because it's got a nice reddish hue to it, which I think brings some more life to the skin. And then moving on to pure Doombull Brown. Quite sparing with these, and if you ever go too light with the highlights, it's fairly simple just to glaze back down a few layers. For darker colour schemes, I tend to do less highlighting overall because I don't want to lighten that base too much and lose the original vibe. I like to do a few final point highlights with a mix of Doombull Brown and Kislev Flesh, and these are going to be used more on, focal points like the face, but you can still get some in around on the hands and other key areas. So there you have it, 3 different skin tones to try out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Hobby Grotto.